Great news this week, my friends. Good inflation readings. Fed pauses their rate hiking campaign. Mortgage apps, we saw more activity and those ticked up. And we saw more inventory hitting the market, at least in Carson City. And the market's reaction, like an ungrateful, entitled little asshole. Our biggest problem right now seems to be that the market builds in good news before we get it. And then we see stocks rally and mortgage-backed securities respond. And then when the good news actually comes out, it isn't good enough to move the market. So let me break down for you the news we got before I complain about the market's reaction. I'll catch you all up in case you had a busy week. I sure as shit did, so there's no judgment from me if you weren't able to read every article and catch every headline. So big news in inflation readings. On Tuesday, we got the CPI reading, and this was a big drop. The market was anticipating an improvement here, maybe 0.2%. Instead, we fell from 4.9% on headline inflation down to 4% flat. That's big. As you know, because we've discussed it right here, shelter costs have been lagging and used car sales have been messing with our inflation readings. The data for shelter, for example, is 6 to 8 months old, but in reality, all current apartment rent indexes show that rents are decreasing. If we had real-time indicators on shelter and on used car sales, headline inflation would have actually come in at around 2%. CPI is the consumer price index. We also got the May producer price index numbers this week. They were anticipated at 1% year-over-year inflation. They came in even lower, also at 1.1% compared to the previous month at 2.3%. So this should all be good news for us in real estate because inflation is the enemy of mortgage interest rates. So if we're really in a period of deflation, which I think it's hard to argue that we're not now, we would see relief coming in terms of interest rates. Then we had the Fed meeting, and the Fed went for a full pause on their rate hiking campaign. There was speculation as to whether they would pause or skip. And if you're wondering what the difference is, let me explain. If they had just skipped taking any action this week for this month, then we would still be waiting on the edge of our seats for next month's meeting. Because if they just skipped this one, then that wouldn't really be a change to their monetary policy. That would just mean they skipped a rate hike at a meeting. But because they paused, that gives us room to assume that the next meeting may not have a rate hike or cut either, that it will be in a paused period. No jacking the rates, no cutting the rates, just actually letting their actions, the 10 rate hikes they've already done, settle. We're currently at a Fed funds rate in the 5s, so maybe they're going to just let that sit and see how it affects the economy. This is really, really good news if the pause holds. That's why when we closed markets on Thursday, mortgage-backed securities had improved 40 basis points. Finally, we saw some green. And today, Friday, we've so far given back about half of those gains. So while interest rates were hesitant to improve on the news that we got this week, we didn't see a big rally after the inflation readings came in. We saw some rally after the Fed announced a pause. And then we're kind of waffling today. The real question is, when does the relief really set in? When do we see that mortgage bonds react the way they should and stop being so bizarre to all of this news that should be very good for interest rates? What will we see next week? That's the big question. Since I had told you interest rates would be in the 5s by now, I'm not going to speculate. This market has gotten way too bizarre. But let me think, what could the next curveball be that we would get that would cause interest rates to not cool down as fast as we like? I think that the big curveball is the Treasury needing to recoup some of the cash that they spent to bail out the banks. So there was about $417 billion in treasuries that they bought, mortgage bonds that they bought to bail out SVB and Signature Bank and prevent any collapses of other small regional banks. They need to raise liquidity, so they're selling those assets. This liquidity squeeze could cause yet another little bump in interest rates because it tips the supply and demand balance for mortgage-backed securities for bonds out of whack, and that's not positive for interest rates. If we do see that kind of spike, I think it will be short-lived, maybe a week or two, and then interest rates come back to their downward trend. What do we do with this information? Do not go dark right now. Just because the information is not exactly what clients may want to hear and it is complicated, That's exactly why you should show up. This is one of the most important weeks to get in front of your audience and explain the news we got. Whether your audience is your client database that you call, use your phone and you call while you're driving to just talk to people, get in front of them. Whether it's an email newsletter that you send out to your buyers and sellers, get in front of them. Whether it's your meetings with clients this weekend, listing appointments, or touring properties with buyers, explain the news that we got this week to them. Tell them that there was a lot of important information that came out in terms of real estate because of the news that impacted interest rates this week. Show up for your social media sphere. Show up and tell people what happened. That's the whole point of me breaking it down for you so that you can break it down for them. The more you consistently show up and establish yourself as a real estate advisor, someone in the know about the market and someone who can help share what they know with people who don't know, the more your business grows. Your call to action isn't always going to be, call me to buy or sell today. I'm here to help you purchase your next real estate. Sometimes your call to action is simply, this is a lot of information to digest. Call me if you want to discuss how it applies to you specifically.